and welcome to TMF Debates Part 2 on our Esports Sports. In Part 1, we pitted the two loudest sides in a full-on verbal fisticuffs, and if you happen to miss that, please click or tap right there to get caught up right now. Regardless, it has kind of been like 2 weeks, so let's go ahead and review our players before continuing. First, we have Pro, who's cheering on for esports to be more than worthy of being called a sport. And then we have Anti, who's adamant that esports will never be called sports regardless of the money or talent involved. To make sense of what these two sides are arguing about, we first need to figure out what they're disagreeing on. And we're going to dissect their points using the 3 crossroads method to get to our middle ground. The first crossroad that these two sides disagree on the most is acknowledging the skill required. The second crossroad would be the definition of an athlete, and lastly, the third crossroad is the competitive nature involved within sports and competitions in general. If at any point you hear anything you agree or disagree with, please join the debate in the comment section down below. But now, let's get into it. To start this debate, we're going to want to try to get Anti to be a little bit more open-minded about esports. You may have noticed in Part 1 how Anti almost immediately shut down about respecting gaming. If you are on the pro side and you're debating an Anti, just be aware that you will not be able to convince everyone. There will be those out there that will refuse to give any kind of respect or acknowledgement to esports, especially when it comes to defining them as a sport. If that's the case, then this whole debate is going to be a complete waste of your time. However, if whom you're talking to or you are an Anti who disagrees that esports are sports but is interested to hearing the counterpoints, then I suggest that we move gently into the debate using examples that are commonly found in both mediums to help everyone find a middle ground. As we start into the first crossroad, it's a good idea to bring up similarities between the two mediums involving their intense work ethic and the training required. For traditional sports, professional athletes are often restricted to a very strict diet, training regimen, and general lifestyle. Now contrast that to an esports example with a Korean team where the team members will often give up the comfort of their own homes to move in to a gaming house so they can be alongside their team members and train for maximum synergy. Seeing this level of dedication on both sides, Anti will need to concede to the point of the sheer amount of training, hours, and skill required to even become a professional esports player, before we even decide whether it's a sport. A common retort from Anti at this point may be to demand that Pro explain to them how skillful professional gaming truly is. Now this demand could leave Pro feeling a little bit bewildered, because if we're going to be completely honest, if you don't play these games, if you see high-level play, the minute details will be lost on you. In researching this episode, I came across such iconic moments as Evo Moment 37, Faker in the League of Legends 2013 finals, and coldzera's double no-scope, just to name a few in the truly uncountable moments of high technical play. Now, if you've never played any of these games, the technical mumbo-jumbo may honestly start to feel like a foreign language. Pro's goal in this crossroad is simply to help Anti see why pro players are worth respecting, not to teach them how to become a gamer. Before we can move forward, Pro will need to concede to the technical glories found within traditional sports, as well as they may be equally likely to be unfamiliar with the minute details of traditional sports. To strengthen their point, Anti may want to pull from such examples as Usain Bolt's world records, the Miracle on Ice, and who could forget Michael Jordan's arm stretch to save the world in Space Jam. Okay, that last one is a bit of a joke, but that's only because traditional sports have been around for literally centuries, and there are way too many moments and memories to bring up in such a short video such as this. So, if you have any yourself, please comment them in the comment section down below, and also if you have any esports memories as well that you'd like to share. Before moving past this crossroad, make sure that you and your friend both agree to some extent that both mediums are capable of pushing humans' ability to the limits and beyond. Assuming both you and whomever you're talking to are both open to showing the other side a little bit more respect, now we can move into the second crossroad, and that one being the dicey definition of an athlete. Now, if we simplify athlete to just people who wear a common uniform, both mediums would fit the bill. But then let's extend it out to the people who have to travel, either nationally or internationally for their sport. Well, again, traditional sports and esports would both fit, as both are actually bound to international athletic visa laws. But I'm convinced that where pro and anti actually disagree is the sheer amount of physical exertion involved. So, to move through this second crossroad, I'm going to utilize Merriam-Webster's #1 definition of an athlete. And that states, a person who is trained or skilled in exercises, sports, or games requiring physical strength, agility, or stamina. We can already tell that this definition is pretty open-ended and includes the term game, so it can already be applied to both sides. However, I'm convinced that it's the last three parts dealing with physical strength, agility, or stamina that may be in debate on the anti-side or the pro side. Now, since there is an or, we have to approach each side individually. Stamina is the easiest part that pro can argue for when we take into account the grind fest that esports tournaments are. They often consist of being a 1-day or 3-day event, which at very minimum is 10 hours of match after match after match. Trust me, it's a grind. Now, the pro players that get to the top, say 6 or 8 depending on the game, well, they're not even done yet. They still have to go. An entire esports event can be compared to an entire season of a traditional sport, since games only last a few hours and are rarely played back to back, causing a full season to be months on end. To start to agree on a new definition of athlete, anti is going to need to concede to the stamina that is involved within esports professionally. On the same token though, pro may already concede to the sheer amount of stamina required in traditional sports, but if they don't, they're going to need to concede that as well. Once you have stamina defined, we'll shift our focus to the remaining two parts, physical strength and agility. Starting with the latter, we can easily find agility within esports once we start to look at their reaction times, their APMs, and their ungodly hand-eye coordination. I've heard it said that you often lose a game if you play it with your mind rather than your hands, meaning that at high-level competition you absolutely need a refined and in-depth understanding of everything that can happen within this game to be able to act within that godlike lightning-fast reflex. We can find people that can act within this instinctual reaction time in both esports and traditional sports, because they're often the ones who write history books and set the bar for all who follow them. Hopefully the agility part is not in question. However, if it is, just go ahead and return to that beginning method that we were talking about by trying to find similarities between the both mediums to help narrow down a middle ground. But say you're debating someone that's only convinced due to analytical means, thankfully, nowadays there's plenty of data on sports and esports, so go ahead and check the description box down below. And now we're to the final part of physical strength. When talking about strength, I need to interject my TMF warning here, because you're going to find some people that have their own personal definition of physical strength so deeply ingrained into their personal bias that you're not going to be able to convince them of anything else. Please stay aware of your own emotions and your compatriots' emotions to know whether or not you need to walk away or change the subject. There's no shame in it, because you're not going to convince everyone. But if you want to continue to have a productive conversation, you'll need to be aware that physical strength, for some people, may never be redefined away from lifting heavy objects. If this is the case, go ahead and skip to the third crossroad. However, if you and whomever you're talking to are open to redefining physical strength, let's continue. In esports, muscle memory is one of the physical areas that must be learned through the countless hours of training and competing. A similar level of muscle memory is found within traditional sports due to the intense training and games played in. Knowing the exact position that your hand, wrist, and arm need to be in allows for one to competently compete in either medium. In addition to the fine-tuned movement, humans are emotional animals first and foremost. And whether you're trying to make a name for yourself, you're a returning champion, or you're already an established name, you have an emotional burden to carry on your shoulders. Regardless of which medium you perform in, all top players are expected to perform at their peak level as that game clock counts down. Those who can't maintain a focused mindset, especially after they've made a mistake, well, they can watch their dreams disappear. It is for this reason that I believe it is crucial to include emotional control within our definition of physical strength. While esports may not traditionally use their entire physical being as a traditional sport, they do use their minds and their hands just as much, if not more. And I believe if we can focus on these two specific areas of muscle memory and emotional control, we can find a satisfying definition of physical strength that both sides can agree on. Using our established agility, our agreed upon stamina, and our new definition of strength, I feel like if you throw those together, both sides can now start to paint a new picture and include in their definition of an athlete, a gamer who sits in a chair. The goal for this crossroad is to simply have both sides acknowledge that athletic qualities can be found within traditional sports and esports. Now that we've crossed the first two crossroads, that being the skill involved and the definition of an athlete, now we'll need to look into the world of competition. Many people use the Global Association of International Sports Federation to define what a sport is. And if we use the GAISF's requirement, say that 5 times fast, if we use their requirement for what a sport is, their first point is it has to be competitive. Now, you may be wondering why we're even bringing this up, because both esports and traditional sports have competitions that happen fairly regularly, right? Well, we have to bring this up because those on the anti often don't equate competition with sport, and thus there can be no agreement if they continue to separate these two. For anti to move past this crossroad, they're going to need to work with pro and come up with a criteria to define a sport as. Regardless if they use the GAISF's criteria, I got it, yay! Or if they use the Encyclopedia of World Sport criteria, or if they take it a step further and both agree to come up with their own, it doesn't matter, we just need to have a criteria set in place to define a sport as. And please let me know what criteria you would use in the comment section down below. Regardless of what you would use, I am confident that any reliable criteria to define a sport as will need to include a competitive nature. So, to move past this crossroad, anti is going to need to concede to the fact that competition can very well equate to sport. If they can't, then the debate is over. And just walk away, change the subject, there's no shame in it. However, if anti and pro can both agree to the competitive nature equating to being a sport, then that middle ground is not too far off. The desirable middle ground that I've come up with will require bringing up a term that we haven't talked about yet, and that is spectator sport. Sports are held in such a high regard because of the love we have for them in our heart. Professional athletes are almost revered as God, almost only because of the feelings that the fans have for them. And in many cases, esports players have experienced this as well. Now, we may not be at the point where guys and gals are swooning over esports players, but we're definitely heading in that direction. Spectators may literally be the lifeblood of any sport, electronic or otherwise. And we find this with male NBA taking up primetime spots, with female basketball barely finding any airtime. Now, I don't want to get off topic by mentioning the disproportionate viewership of female and male sports. I just bring it up to make a point. And that is, if there's enough demand, a sporting event will be shown over other events. In recent years, esports has started to garner very similar demands, and thanks to services such as Twitch.tv, the demand has never been easier to fill, creating an environment where watching a gaming competition from home is very similar to a game day where you would invite friends over, have food and drinks. With all the similarities discussed between the three crossroads and now our new middle ground, I feel like we have more than enough to bring esports into at least the term of spectator sport. And we already know that traditional sports carry this title. Pro and anti may never agree that esports are sports, but I hope after this debate they'll be able to concede that both of them make a wonderful spectator sport. What do you think though? Is calling both mediums spectator sports good enough or not? Should we outright just call esports sports? Or will they forever be in their own little special category? Please let me know what you think by joining the debate in the comment section down below, and thank you so much for spending your time with me. It means a lot to me. And now, let's wrap this episode up. Please hit that notification bell down below to make sure that you're here in 2 weeks for the TMF debate on Do Pets Make You Parents? And if you happen to be watching this past the initial 2-week upload, just click or tap right there to watch it now. If you like what I do on this channel, please check out the description box for easy to follow me links. As always, this has been TMF, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the time in whatever zone you find yourself. Doodles!